Hi, I'm Rachel, and it's a kind of gloomy Saturday outside. There's calls for thunderstorms in the future, but hopefully that should not impact me that too much for the next several hours because I will be at the National Book Festival. My dad is on the way. He drives over from Baltimore and parks his car in Silver Spring, and we go into the city, DC, together. And then we split up because we have various panels and things that have caught our fancy separately, but hopefully we'll see each other along the way. And meanwhile, for me and you, I'll be taking you along with me and hopefully showing you some panels, showing you some excitement, showing you some of the special to this year, activities. We are celebrating in part America's 250th anniversary. So yeah, very excited to get going. Let's get to it.
There are people who go through terrible things if they choose a path that is chaotic and violent and they want to inflict their pain upon other people. There are people who choose power over everything else. And then there are people who choose community, and there are people who choose love. And there are people who choose to put others' needs and suffering and their hopes before their own desires. And I think in that difference, you have the difference between a great leader and a monster. And I think that's something we're all very familiar with.
Do you think, is she redeemable at all?
It depends on her, right? She's done a lot of bad things. She finds herself unable to get out of this, these terrible things that she's done. She's selling herself this story like, well, I'm already walking down this road. Like, I can't go back now. And this is for my people. She's saying over and over again, this is for my people, this is for my people. But at some point, there's a line in the book where it's, one of the characters says something like, that's the defense of tyrants everywhere. And it is. And so we will see if Anis in his second book actually is able to, reconcile what she hoped she would be and what she actually is, or if she's just going to sort of keep walking down this, like, no, I'm doing this for my people, and that justifies all means.
is surprising to you that there were women writing fantasy, because within genre circles, and science fiction and fantasy are a little notable in that they have, unlike a lot of other literary genres, they have a really robust community of convention culture. So there are science fiction fantasy conventions, there are regional ones, there are bigger international ones, the World Cons, the World Fantasies and stuff. So there's often a kind of rolling intergenerational conversation about publishing, about categories, about craft that kind of emerges there. So having been mostly in those spaces, and in part because I kind of became aware of genre from working in a bookstore when I was 17, and the manager was good friends with people who ran conventions and stuff. So a lot of my sense of genre truisms come from there. And one of the genre truisms was women write fantasy, men write science fiction. So I very much grew up with the sense that the bullshit gender bifurcation was actually the gendering literally of genre. Yeah. It's always funny to me to say gender and genre because I also speak French and they are So let's analyze that. My gender is fun. And so there's that element of it is really interesting because within genre circles, and again, this is over a long span of time, everything is kind of a moving target. I've always felt that there was more respect accorded to science fiction as the thing that is written by men, and by proxy, the thing that is written from people with STEM backgrounds, the thing that, so, the kind of, even in the sciences, or even within science fiction, there's that bifurcation of women write sort of squishy science fiction, and it's you have to do chemistry and biology and social science, and yeah, there's really I think of it as the lowest scale of science fiction hardness. Hard science. And it's like a dick joke. It really is. So that's part of when I think about oh wait, actually there might be a broader audience to whom the touchstones of fantasy writing are almost exclusively to the obscuring of the rest of the field. Tolkien, George R. R. Martin, maybe we're gonna say Terry Brooks, or the writers of big fat books. Yeah, right. The kind of George talking books. But that hasn't really been my experience, despite the fact that I have zero trouble identifying my favorite book of all time is The Hobbit. I imprinted on it when I was 7. I loved it. I still love it deeply. I still think it is my favorite book. But to me, fantasy, all of the people who I read and were very formative to me, besides Tolkien, are women. Are Terry Windling, are Holly Black, are a lot of the people writing their fantasy books in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. A lot of which, it gets lots of subgenres mythic fiction, or urban fantasy, not really paranormal romances, but in a fantasy set in the cities. And so there's all of that is kind of what I think about, and I kind of have to remind myself that, oh yeah, there are some extremely popular properties, and for goodness sake, Brandon Sanderson, the fact that there's an entire industry around him and his writing, and that's what most people are to think of. So I have to remember that. So to me, it's actually been more my experience to see fantasy as something that I haven't felt a barrier to it, that I've almost felt sometimes relegated to it in a way, and similar to what you're describing with fantasy. But I try to flip that relegation by, I say this almost every time I get on a stage lately. To me, all fiction is fantasy first, and everything else is a subgenre, including domestic realism.
Bye.